much to everyone for joining us this afternoon for the University of Regina's 2022 Alumni Effect Virtual Speaker Series. My name is Mark Budekoffer, and I'm the Director of Advancement with our University Advancement and Communications Office. And in my role, it's my honor to work alongside alumni and passionate supporters of the university to share the story of impact and potential the University of Regina offers. Before I introduce Teresa, our guest today, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Regina and its federated colleges are on Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 territories. The homelands of the Nihilwak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and Michif Métis nations. This is a very important part of our past and an even more important part of our future. And for this reason, we acknowledge it as we continue to walk down a path of reconciliation. The University of Regina's Alumni Engagement Department is pleased to be able to offer the Alumni Effect Speaker Series. We've had an amazing opportunity to connect with alumni. Today is going to be no different. This is my first time hosting a lecture in this series, and I hope that your time with us today motivates you to return for future sessions. Now, I do want to point out that these sessions are being recorded, and we're doing so that we can post them on the University of Regina's alumni website, so more people can enjoy them and share them with friends and family after it gets posted. You will see a link to the alumni website in the chat, and that you can access the video at a later time. And now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our October speaker in the University of Regina's 2022 Alumni Effect Virtual Speaker Series, Teresa Posyniak. We're glad you're joining us.
Thank you.
Teresa is an alum of the University of Regina and earned a Bachelor of Education and her Bachelor of Fine Arts, both from the University of Regina, before going on to earn her Master's of Fine Arts from the University of Calgary. Teresa is now an established artist based in Calgary and works primarily on pieces that reflect her activism on behalf of women, children, and the environment. One of her more notable pieces is her 1992 sculpture, Lest We Forget, dedicated to missing and murdered women, which was permanently installed at the University of Calgary Faculty of Law in 1994. This piece, along with her other work, can be found by clicking the link in the chat. Today, Teresa will discuss her experience as a student and as an alum of the University of Regina and share with us the challenges and steps that she took to achieve her goals. Following our discussion between Teresa and I, which will last about 15 minutes or so, we will have an opportunity for questions, which we will take through the chat. As you listen to our discussion, please type your questions and we will follow through them as they come in. I will share and read them with Teresa at the end of our discussion. So now I will turn the floor over to Teresa and allow you to introduce yourself a little bit more.
So I guess the first question is that they wanted to ask me is about what inspired me to follow my career path and what steps did I take to achieve my goals. But first of all, I want to say how honored I am to be asked to speak about my journey to becoming an artist and how this wonderful university helped me along the way. And again, I encourage people to take a look at my website, teresaposyniak.com, during the session. It always helps to get a sense of an artist through her work, not just her words. So it was a long and rocky and often painful road I traveled, but I did have an overarching goal to find something to do with my life that had a lot of meaning and was all-consuming. I had a taste of that as a child from ages 10 to 15 when I threw myself into piano, racing through the Royal Conservatory music program from grades 1 to 9 in 4 years, acing competitions, burning myself out, practicing up to 5 hours a day. I quit though, partway through the conservatory's grade 10 because I could no longer endure the grueling hours of practice at that level and still hang out with my friends, play sports, and mainly live a normal teenager's life. And during those 4.5 years, though, glued to the piano, I learned what it was like to be self-motivated and to spend long periods alone trying to perfect a piece. This experience left an indelible mark on me, and which I eventually replicated in my visual art practice. However, the emergence of feminism in the 60s hadn't yet reached career counseling for girls at grade 12 in Marion High School in 1968 and 69. And my choices were really limited. Teacher, nurse, secretary, nun, or stay-at-home mom. I dismissed the latter three. My beloved godmother, well-known Saskatchewan artist, Lorraine Malik, I'm sure some of you have heard, tried to encourage me to pursue art. But the problem I had was I was fascinated by so many things, all of the arts, literature, writing, math, sports, politics, et cetera, et cetera. So when I entered a general BA program in 1969 at the University of Regina, I thought that maybe my direction should be math, of all things. But a lowly C or a 2 in pre-calculus class wasn't exactly inspirational. So I turned to education, majoring in English with an emphasis on drama. And like a kid in a candy shop, I perused each semester's delightful menu of courses, and there were so many. Like geography, loved it. English classes. I remember Professor Ray Mize, now retired, teaching, giving us metaphorical explorations into 19th century novels. Absolutely love that. And I think here today we have Steve Heron in my second year. He was my social psychology professor. And Steve encouraged all of us to develop a deeper perspective of humanity in relation to society and politics. And in fact, so enthusiastic were some of our classmates that we spent every Tuesday night until the wee hours of the morning at Steve's house discussing the topics that he raised. And what happened because of that is this fueled my desire to explore the world. And then what followed that was a very big impulsive decision to take a job teaching English as a second language in a Franciscan mission school in southern Peru, 8,000 feet up in the Andes in the spring of 1971. But instead of returning home, as my parents wanted me to after the school year, and finishing my degree, I embarked instead on a 12-month sojourn through South America with a group of Argentine craftsmen who loved my drawing. I mean, I didn't even realize I could draw at that point, but I, wanted to help out. And so I decided to draw and they really liked it. So they put me to work for many hours a day, drawing designs on their leather purses, belts, and eventually their jewelry. While life there was challenging, making our wares in the slums, because that's the only place we could afford to do it, selling our products on the street, and me struggling to learn Spanish in order to sell our wares. But in spite of all that, I once again had that feeling, that sense of deep immersion in something I loved. However, once I returned to Regina in late 1972, I continued with my B.Ed, not because I didn't want to pursue art. In fact, I did for years through continuing ed classes at the university, but I lacked confidence in my talent. An art career seemed unreachable, intimidating. Also, I wanted to get a good job that paid, be independent. And I knew from witnessing my artist godmother's struggles that this was unlikely to happen as an artist. Artists give up a lot to do what they do. And so I finished my B.Ed, spent the final semester as an intern in Île-de-la-Crosse, northern Saskatchewan, a school built to replace the despised residential school and its decades of abuse of the Cree Métis community. And again, that the university's education department allowed me to do this in a remote community, 10-hour drive north of Regina, rather than go and do it in a local high school was remarkable. And even my professor at that time, who was supposed to supervise the internship, she was actually really thrilled to be able to drive up north, spend a few days up there, and get a really good sense of what the school was trying to do to remediate what it had done before, as if it was possible. But I mean, this is almost 50 years ago, right? That this struggle was happening and awareness. So I was thrilled to be hired there the following year from 74 to 75, but that job ended prematurely when the elderly priest, who was formerly in charge of the residential school for decades and the architect of the abuse that they suffered there, created such resistance to our inclusive community approach to teaching, involving the parents in the school for the first time, being kind to the children, not hitting them if they dared to speak Cree, that stuff like that. He finally pressured us to leave, and the school year ended prematurely. I ended up teaching English and drama at Belfort Technical High School from 1975 to 78. But the lingering effects of my Northern experience only served to heighten my awareness of social justice, not only regarding women and children, but also the Indigenous communities. While taking on a heavy teaching load, I threw myself into social activism, and I became part of a very vocal women's group in Regina committed to fighting for access to abortion and birth control and raising awareness of domestic violence and sexual abuse. I was stretched in myriad directions. And like many young activists at that time, carried the weight of the world on my shoulders. While teaching English and drama was satisfying, I knew I wasn't happy in this role, and my health really suffered. And that seems to be a recurrent thing with me. If I'm unhappy, if I'm too stressed, my body goes to hell. And so once again, I took a big step and then added a new question. What if? What if I quit teaching, pursued a BFA degree? What if, instead of viewing art making as a hobby, as I had for years, what would happen if I jumped into the degree program completely? So at 27, I took a giant leap and was granted a leave from the Board of Education to attend art school, not knowing where this would lead.
It's truly humbling to hear your story. It's incredible, but also to be having a conversation with someone who definitely has never taken the easy path. And you've done a lot of the hard things that most people, probably including myself, won't choose to tackle. So I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. As a follow-up, my next question is, so as you made this change, what challenges do you face while following this career path and taking those steps?
Well, many challenges. But first of all, I have to say, the expression, I died and went to heaven. Well, that's how I felt when I started the BFA program at the University of Regina. I loved my classes, my professors, the assignments, the atmosphere. And that old, lovely visual arts building on College and Broad, remember that? It was so isolated from the main campus. I really, truly felt I was cloistered in this dream space. And it provided a distinctive atmosphere with the brickwork, the high ceilings, the tall windows that opened. It was truly an art school, and I luxuriated in being a student again after some years of teaching. But an initial challenge was overcoming my preconceptions of what I thought I could do with my art. I was thinking, oh, my art, but no, it was student work. It wasn't really art. So I had to come to terms with that. But I also had a glorious vision of creating artwork to raise consciousness of the issues I was passionate about. What I quickly learned was that I was a rank beginner in a tough, demanding discipline. Well, there were many disciplines. And there was so much to learn, and I had to do the hard work. The problem with fully committing to my art studies was I needed to be alone a lot. Art making and research are solitary activities, which is always a problem for those going into the arts. Reluctantly, I withdrew from the activist scene in Regina in order to pursue my art studies. Although I knew deep down that I wanted to create work that made people think, that resonated with people fighting for social justice, I realized it would take years of intense focus on learning my craft and finding out what I excelled in, if anything. I mean, I didn't really know. That was the true challenge. I still dabbled in some initiatives in the community and appeared regularly as a freelance broadcaster for CBC Radio's program Saskatchewan Today to express my views about pertinent issues. This is one of the jobs I had going through art school, as well as cooking in the restaurant upstairs, downstairs. Some of you might remember that. And ultimately completing my BFA and trying to find out if I could really be a professional artist were my goals.
Well, it's as one figures out their path, it takes time, and as you mentioned, and it seems you really took your time to find the thing that was going to work best for you. How did the University of Regina help you with that process and reaching your career goals that you were figuring out?
Well, okay, I'll answer that question, but I'll also tell you about my mentors. Okay. So as a young feminist, I was initially disappointed that there were no female art professors in the BFA program, but I very quickly became very happy with the art faculty. I forged lifelong relationships with some of them and basked in their support for many years after leaving Regina. And it's not like they were lovey-dovey all the time and complimenting me and the other students. They were very harsh, very tough, but they also were very encouraging. So it was pretty grueling. Roger Lee, my art history professor, was a man ahead of his time with his approach to this subject, managing to portray not just the sequences of images of art and architecture through the ages, but also how the work we are looking at related to the times in which they were created. He made the work alive. And you know what? I still consult my notes from my art history classes with Roger to this day. Another mentor was my painting and drawing professor, the late Frank Nolf, who became a good friend until he died. He taught me much about the ineffable aspects of art, the depth of feeling one can experience when viewing a powerful work. His idea that art can be experiential has always resonated with me. Frank encouraged me to go on to my MFA as quickly as possible after my BFA to keep up the momentum. And this is not always advised, but I was turning 30 and I really wanted to get on with life. The late printmaking professor Jack Cowan taught tough, rigorous courses in lithography and etching. And it was rare in those days for art professors to teach students the business of art, which is actually a very, very important thing, including how to write applications for art grants. But Jack made a point of doing this, and I benefited greatly for many years after that. With his guidance, I was able to win a scholarship to the Banff Center for the Arts and study lithography for a month. It was there. I finally decided to dig in and devote myself to finishing the last year of the BFA and apply for a Master of Fine Arts degree somewhere in Canada, with the ultimate goal to get a tenured teaching position in a university somewhere in Canada that could afford me the time to work in my studio and have exhibitions. And as they say, the rest is history. Although starting as a painter in the MFA program at the University of Calgary in '81, I was quickly transferred to the sculpture department, where I completed a large sculptural installation called Sanctuary, which for years, well, I would say for the last 40 years, has morphed into many new installations that is using the same elements to create work of maybe different contexts, different spaces. And out of that, a few elements became a public sculpture, such as you mentioned, Lest We Forget, a memorial to missing and murdered women, installed in the law school here in 1994. But Sanctuary, my original installation, its most recent iteration was at the Alberta Gallery of Art in Edmonton, 2019 to 2020, where another Saskatchewan grad, Lindsay Sharman from the University of Saskatchewan, curated an exhibition called Rebellious, which featured 24 Alberta women artists who exhibited widely during the 80s at a time when women artists were just starting to enter the mainstream art galleries. So my installation, entitled Presciently Salvage, Remnants of Hope and Despair, was placed alone in a large room, all 56 vertical, 8-foot tall sculptures. And just after the show ended in February of 2020 is when COVID struck. And it kind of chilled me that my installation just felt, I guess, creepily foretelling what was going to be happening to us over the last few years. You know, the horrors that we were going to face. I mentioned earlier how in order to learn the skills necessary to be an artist during my BFA, I had to withdraw from my former life of activism. But thankfully, over the years, I've learned to manage working in isolation while engaging with the community. In fact, much of my work over the past 3 decades is inspired by my involvement with others. My paintings and drawings of women reflecting vulnerability and resiliency have resonated with many advocates seeking solutions to intimate partner violence, such as the Prairie Action Foundation. And I believe we have here today Margaret Newell from Calgary, now in Toronto, the founder of this amazing, amazing group. And I believe she also has an honorary doctorate from University of Regina. About 20 years ago as well, I began collaborating with Blackfoot women elders to paint a series of paintings of them in a manner that they wanted to be reflected. So this required a lot of travels to the reserve, consultation with the elders, and permission for every item that appeared in the paintings, as well as the poses. I worked with dancers, a poet, and for many years, a well-known science author and playwright, Alana Mitchell, who is also a graduate of the U of R and received an honorary doctorate some years ago from there. And she inspired me to pursue works on environmental themes emanating from her research. And this is my focus now in painting, but my focus in sculpture is actually also environmental, but also coalescing with some of the other themes regarding women. So, armed with my B.Ed and a BFA from the University of Regina and later an MFA from the U of Calgary, I was able to secure years of sessional teaching jobs at both places, at both the University of Calgary and the Alberta University of the Arts, as well as many visiting artist opportunities in other institutions, but never that elusive tenured status, as many of us who have tried to get those jobs just can't. Instead, I've devoted my life to my studio practice, my exhibitions and workshops. Also, I've raised 2 children. I'm now a grandmother of several, and which was actually something that in my early years as an artist, until even during the 80s, early 90s, I thought you couldn't be a serious woman artist and have children. But thankfully, I proved them wrong, and I know lots of other women have done that as well. And that has enriched my life and probably changed the course of my work as well. In the end, I'm going to say I can't express how much the University of Regina, the courses, my professors, the learning environment contributed to my long and varied career. I return here often to visit my family. In December, I'm invited to speak to the art students at the U of R, something I never envisioned as a young art student. There is so much to be grateful for. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And as you were going through, and many of the names that you mentioned are people that I know are still really involved with the university and the faculty to this day. And we're really grateful to be able to count you as part of that. And I know the faculty is looking forward to you speaking. For anyone, we will now begin the Q&A, and do have a question coming in here on the chat. So first one, I'm going to go right to it, Teresa, is in an art world that rewards youth, emerging and new media, comment here, ageist art world, really. How have you worked or approached it to remain relevant and connected and fulfilled?
Well, I know that there's a an emphasis on going into new media, video, etc. I have stuck with my routine, and I guess my way of doing it is to work with people in the community to be inspired by some of their themes, to maybe attach myself to some of the events that happen, and as such, I'm happy to say I have friends of all ages, from their 20s to their 90s, and people that I consult. I really believe in the connectedness of the community, and that has really enriched me and I hope, kept me relevant, kept what I'm doing relevant.
Next question. How did you first initiate relations with the Indigenous communities, as this can sometimes be challenging?
Well, first of all, there was the experience in South America where I did spend a lot of time in some Indigenous communities like in Peru, the Quechua and Aymara, and some of them in Bolivia, where I lived for a number of months. But then teaching up north in northern Saskatchewan was just a wonderful immersive experience. And I have to say, I came out of there never having more respect than ever for the Cree Métis people that live there, and complete appalling what they had to go through with the residential school there, which we were finding out about 50 years ago. And then meeting a Blackfoot elder, Dr. Linda Menigans, who right now is the Vice President of Indigenization and Decolonization at Mount Royal University. And I met her in 2004, and it was she who introduced me to some of the women elders in the Blackfoot Nation. And we just slowly started on a series of portraits of some of them, and then it just kept branching out and branching out and branching out. And to be really honest, I'm fully aware that I'm not Indigenous and painting Indigenous women. So for the first year of doing these works, Linda and I worked it out so that I would paint a couple dozen of them, have the elders come to my studio and approve them. And if they didn't approve them, I was never going to exhibit them or sell them. So I spent a whole year not knowing if what I was doing would resonate with them, would be respectful enough, would be authentic enough. And once they said, go for it, then I did more. But every painting took a long time because it involved a lot of consultation with each elder or their families. So and I'm still working in that direction these days. Linda Menigans and I continue to have plans.
Thank you so much. Next question is, can you elaborate more on your time in various activism roles and how these played a role in your later art?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, I became a feminist in the 60s, while I was in high school, and then jumped through to South America, living in third world countries and witnessing the life of people that live in those conditions. Back to Regina, back to our privileged lives in North America, and becoming heavily involved with the women's movement there. As I said before, when I started my BFA, I really wanted to reflect these issues in my work, but realized that I needed to learn how to become an artist first and learn the skills. And then I didn't realize how hard it would be actually to reflect my ideas and my passion about certain issues in my work. It is actually a very challenging thing to do. And I can only say that I've been successful in some things, others not. Others are just stuff that goes above the couch in the living room. But I think, so my activity in the women's movement and the pro-choice specifically continued throughout the 80s. And I think it was after the Montreal massacre in '89. And I had my second child, my daughter. She was 6 months old when that happened. And I think it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I just had to be more literal. I had to be stronger in what I projected through my work. And so that what followed there was the sculpture that ended up in the law school with the names 135 murdered Canadian women, many of them Indigenous. And then back into drawing and painting and using the female figure, the nude, but in a different way than has historically been presented. And so some of those images, let's say women drawn by a woman, are quite different. And some of them have been used in the Prairie Action Foundation's research books for fundraising, for their events, for their work. And it just goes on, you know. I'm just always inspired by my relationships with these people who are actually doing the really hard work. And I just try and tie in with them, you know.
So the next question, and this will, as we get close here, this will probably be our last. But Teresa, I met you when you were involved in the Public Art Board and your steadfast commitment to moving public art forward in Calgary, and it was so inspiring. Can you comment on that period in your career and the impact on arts and artists in Calgary?
Well, considering that I had a public artwork installed in '94 at the law school here, I've just always been a big proponent of public art. So when the city of Calgary decided to put together a public art board and a program, and that was 2005, I was very honored to be on that board, representing the art community in the city of Calgary. And so we had to actually create policy for the program, appoint juries, and look at practices all over North America. We are working with public art program staff hired by the city. And we had to fight politically tooth and nail with city councilors who just thought it was a waste of money, you know. And we eventually created a program that was internationally recognized. I spent the first 5 years of the board's existence, and unfortunately, in the recent years, it's been quite eroded by the politics here. And I just hope it can resurface. But I truly believe that public art is such an important thing, to see it all around us, not just in the city center, but in places that you would never think a public piece would be established.
Couldn't agree with you more, and I'm sure there are many others on this call today who would agree with that importance. Well, I think we're now up to time, so I want to thank you for being a leader. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being an activist, and for the time that you've taken throughout your career to be intentional in the things that you do. And I'm so grateful for the time that you've spent with us today. As the father of 2 young girls, I hope they will one day be as courageous as you are, and speak out for those who may not have a voice. And as you were talking, though, I hope they'll also look back on their conservatory piano lessons that they're struggling through right now and think that though that was time well spent, even though they hate me for it right now. But on behalf of everyone here today on this call, and everyone who is going to have the great fortune of listening to this after it's posted on our website, thank you very much for your time today, for being a proud University of Regina alumna, and for continuing to stay connected with our school. We're so very, very proud.
Thank you very much, and I'm so happy to have been invited.
With that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and contributing to the conversation. And thank you again, Teresa, for sharing your expertise and time. As I mentioned earlier, a video of today's Alumni Effect will be posted soon to the alumni section on our website. Link to our website can be found again here in the chat, and feel free to share the link with your family and friends. And don't forget to check the University of Regina website for information on upcoming events in this series and more. Our next Alumni Effect speaker will be on November 22nd and features Ranjith Narayanasamy, the President and CEO of the Petroleum Technology Research Center. Until then, take care and stay warm.